Chair Holland, it's 6 o'clock and I think MCAT is ready to go. Would you like to start the meeting and then I'll do the Zoom directions?
Oh, sorry. Do you want me to take roll first and then you'll provide information about how people can make public comment?
Yes,
Okay.
that sounds great.
Okay, so I'll call this meeting to order and welcome everyone. And so at this point, I'm seeing all trustees either physically present or present on Zoom, except Trustee Decker. So I could take roll, but I think everyone would have access to the agenda and know who's here. So it's Trustee Avgiris, Trustee Ahabens, Trustee Lorenzen, Trustee McDonald, Trustee Mercer, Trustee Oldperson, Trustee Sturbis, Trustee Vogel, Trustee Wake, and myself. And so with that, before we stand for the pledge, I'll have Hatton explain just the logistics of participating via Zoom.
Okay, good evening. This is Hatton Littman, the Communications Director. If you're joining us on Zoom, there are a few controls that will allow you to participate in the meeting tonight. If you take the cursor to the bottom of the screen in the lower left-hand corner, you'll see buttons for mute and start or stop video. That's how you can control what we see and hear from you tonight. Please stay muted unless you are giving public comment in order to keep the audio feed clean. If you take your cursor to the middle of the screen, you'll see an icon that says chat. The chat is disabled tonight. The only person that you'll be chatting with is me as the meeting host. The trustees will not see your comments if they're placed in the chat. So if you're having any technical difficulties, feel free to chat me. And then if you'd like to make public comment tonight, you have two options. If you have a new version of Zoom, in the bottom right-hand corner, there's a button that says reactions. It looks like a smiley face. If you click on that button, one of the options will be raise hand. If you have an old version of Zoom, you'll need to click on the participants menu. It'll open a white box on the right-hand side of your screen, and at the bottom of that white box will be a button that says raise hand. When you raise your hand, you'll be placed in order of clicking the button. So you'll be placed in a list and we'll call on you one by one to unmute and make your public comment. If you're on the phone tonight, you'll be able to raise your hand by pressing *9, and you'll be able to mute and unmute yourself by pressing *6. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And with that, we'll move on to item number 2 on the agenda, which is to stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. And Dr. Watson, if you can get us started.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Item number 3 on the agenda is to review, revise, and approve the agenda. Is there any request from any trustee to either modify the order of items on the agenda or in some way revise it? I'm not seeing any indications in the boardroom, and I'm not seeing any hands up on Zoom, so we'll go ahead and approve the agenda as it has been sent out. Item number 4 is to approve the minutes from the Board of Trustees regular board meeting from February 9th, 2021. They are found in the attachments to the agenda beginning on page 4. Are there any requests for any kind of modification to the minutes before I seek a motion to approve them? And I'm not seeing any hands raised. So is there a motion to approve the minutes from the February 9th, 2021 regular board meeting? Moved by Trustee Lorenzen, seconded by Trustee Oldperson, just because I saw her before I saw Trustee Avgiris' hand go up. So all those in favor of approving the minutes from the February 9th board meeting, please indicate by saying aye or raising your hand. And I see hands raised. I don't see Trustee McDonald's hand raised. Oh, and I do see Trustee Wake's hand raised.
I'm here.
Okay, do you vote to approve the minutes or to not approve the minutes?
Yes, sorry.
Okay, and then Trustee Vogel? Oh, she has her hand up. Yay.
And Vogel is yes.
Thank you. And so with that, we move on to public comment on non-agenda items. As Hatton explained, the mechanism for making public comment is to raise your hand. You'll go into a queue, raise your virtual hand. You'll go into a queue, and then we will call on you. We ask that you keep comments on non-agenda items at this point to 3 minutes. And please identify yourself and spell either your first or last name for our minutes if it has an unusual spelling. And with that, I'll look for hands raised for public comment on non-agenda items. I don't see any, and Hatton's also indicating that she doesn't. So we will go on. There is written correspondence in the attachments to the agenda. And now we're going to welcome our student trustees. And I know that I'll just go ahead and do it somewhat alphabetically. So Jaden Beat couldn't be here from Big Sky, so she has asked Ashlyn Everett to substitute. So Ashlyn, if you want to go ahead and say your first and last name and just identify the school you're from, even though we trustees know where you're from, and then we'd love to hear your report from Big Sky.
All right, my name is Ashlyn Everett, and I'm representing Big Sky High School. So in terms of our leadership and overview at Big Sky, this week we begin periods 5 through 8. Students have an opportunity over the week of spring break to come in and receive support to help with assignments or if they're failing a class. And Big Sky teachers are all learning to use Blackboard to communicate with parents and students about this intervention. And then Big Sky is starting to work on their master schedule for the 2021-22 school year. And the goal will be to get schedules to students in May of 2021. The juniors are gearing up for the ACT on April 6th. English teachers are using practice material to help get students ready. And then in terms of athletics and activities, the winter sports season has come to a close at Big Sky with the official first day of spring sports season scheduled for March 15th. Congratulations to all of our girls basketball, boys basketball, swimming, speech and debate, and wrestling participants. We are so proud of our Eagles and their commitment to our Big Sky Eagle Code: be respectful, be responsible, be resilient. Special shout outs to the state AA wrestling champion Izzy Moreno and 3-time state AA wrestling champion Hunter Meinzen. Shout outs to state AA swim girls 200-yard medley swimmers Regan Remmers, Ruby Earhart, Addie Lewis, and Grace Wandler, who placed 5th. State champion Addie Lewis, who is a Frenchtown Co-op student in the 50-yard freestyle, as well as a 2nd place finisher in the 100-yard freestyle event, and to Michael Parkey, who took 4th in the boys 100-yard backstroke. Big Sky will host our spring sports virtual parent meetings for softball, track and field, and tennis this week via Zoom. We are looking forward to heading back outside for athletics and activities as we round out this school year. Our BPA chapter is also gearing up for the state competition that is coming up on this Sunday and Monday. They have also opened up their store, which has been very successful this far, and are working on some renovation plans. And that's all I have.
Sorry. Thank you, and thank you for subbing in for Jaden. We really appreciate it. And then I see we have Malone and Daisy from Sentinel. If you both want to, I don't know the order in which you want to give your student trustee report, but if you can just state your first and last name, and you're both from Sentinel. So go ahead with whoever's going to start first.
Okay, can you guys all hear me okay?
Yes, fine.
Perfect. Okay, so good evening. I am Malone Ingram, and I am here with my co-trustee Daisy, and we're from Sentinel High School. At Sentinel, we continue to work hard to uphold our COVID-safe protocols. This past week, we have wrapped up our first block of the new semester, and this week, students began the new block by returning to their 4th, 5th, and 6th period classes. Additionally, students will be working hard this week as spring break is just around the corner. In sports news, wrestling and swimming just wrapped up their seasons at their respective state tournaments. Wrestling was in Flathead, and Sentinel fought hard, finishing 9th overall. Some of our wrestlers placed higher in individual events. And the state AA swim meet took place in Great Falls this past Friday. Sentinel is coming. Sorry. Okay, so the state AA swim meet took place in Great Falls this past Friday. Our boys took a strong 4th place, with the girls finishing 5th. We took 1st in the boys 200-yard medley relay, and we want to congratulate Bremer Deaton and Jackson Moe for placing 1st in 2 individual events. Our boys and girls basketball teams are heading to Great Falls next week to compete in their state tournaments. And our spring sports, tennis, track, and softball are gearing up for their season starting in the next couple of weeks. And now I'll pass it on to Daisy.
All right, I'm Daisy. I'm also from Sentinel, and I'll be continuing on with this report, moving on to activities and clubs. So looking at our clubs and activities, Sentinel is busy as well. Our Model United Nations Club competed at the National High School Model United Nations Conference this past week. With in-depth debate and diplomacy, Sentinel was recognized as an outstanding delegate school. In light of their success, some of the students from Sentinel MUN are looking to compete at other national conferences this coming spring. In other news, Amnesty International is wrapping up their Fair Trade Chocolate fundraiser to raise money for spring events and also raise awareness for the organization. The National Honor Society has begun their tutoring program to help Sentinel students excel in their classes, and they're also looking for volunteer opportunities around the community. For student government, they're busy with spring activities as well. They're planning a senior week full of fun and COVID-safe activities to make up for the lost opportunities at the beginning of the year. They're also working on a virtual talent show and other engaging activities with the student body. And that wraps up this month's report with activities, clubs, and sports. Thank you so much for your time this evening. Malone and I hope everyone was staying safe and healthy, and we look forward to next meeting. Thank you.
Thanks. And now we'll move on. I don't see Eric or Claire from Sealy Swan High School. Is that correct, Hatton? I didn't see their names. So we'll move on to Mariposa Ristau, and if you can unmute yourself and let us know what's happening at Willard Alternative High School.
Hello. We are currently on our second to last week of the first 25-day rotation this third semester. This series of 2 classes has been the first to be attended 4 days a week. And some benefits that I have observed due to this transition are that student-teacher relationships have deepened, leading to more active participation in class. Support for learning, emotions, and food access is now more available. And for a lot of kids at Willard, they go there because needs of theirs are not being met elsewhere. Willard does an amazing job at meeting people's personal needs, and now with 4 days a week, there is more time for this. Willard is structured to simply help kids graduate and to teach the basics rather than following a strict curriculum. And this breeds creativity. And yeah, that's about all I have. Thank you.
Thanks. We love hearing from all the trustees about what's going on in your building, so thank you so much for that. And last but certainly not least, Waverly Winter from Hellgate High School. And next time, Waverly, I'll have you go first since you're at the end of the alphabet, so we'll switch it up next month. So go ahead, Waverly.
Okay, great. Can everybody hear me?
Yep, coming through good.
Great. Hello, I'm Waverly Winter, and I am the student trustee from Hellgate High School. So this week, we began our second block of classes, which are periods 4, 5, and 6, and we'll be in these classes for the next 6 weeks. Next week, we have spring break, and when we return back from spring break, juniors will take the ACT that Tuesday. And I know that a bunch of students, teachers, and faculty are looking forward to the healthy and safe week off. This past weekend, swimming and wrestling competed in state, and swimming was in Great Falls, and one relay placed in the top 6, and a number of Hellgate swimmers placed individually. Wrestling took place in Kalispell, and Hellgate placed 16th. The boys basketball team unfortunately didn't move on from playoffs, but they had an amazing season filled with fun and competitive games. And the girls basketball team are traveling to Great Falls this week for state. The varsity girls and boys hockey teams both won state over the past 2 weeks, and the high school house hockey, they are in their semifinal game on Wednesday night. After spring break, spring sports will begin, and this includes tennis, softball, and track and field. As for Hellgate clubs and activities, SAVE is working on a new recycling and composting bins that will be put up around the school, as well as growing flowers in the newly built greenhouse for Mother's Day. NHS is working on a water bottle drive, and individual members are starting to present and finish up their individual service project. And next month, juniors will join NHS along with the seniors. BP has state coming up, and all their members qualified for state, which is fantastic. Flagship is up and running, and chess club, D&G, and many more flagship activities and clubs are going on at Hellgate. Student government has been working on creating signs for winter sports state and inspirational quotes to be put up on the lockers around the school. This year has been very weird, and many people are so thankful for the teachers and staff members and their hard work during this odd year. Thank you, and have a fabulous rest of your evening.
And thanks to all the student trustees for their diligence this entire school year. It's been especially challenging, and we really appreciate how you've always been here, been present, and provided great insight into what's happening in your buildings. So thank you very much. As you know, we'd love if you want to stay for the rest of the meeting, but you don't have to. And so I know it sounds like there's a lot on your plates right now, so please feel free to leave whenever is convenient for you. So we will move on to announcements from the superintendent. So Dr. Watson?
Good evening, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Those online too, can you hear me all right? Sharon says yes, thank you. Trustee Sturbis. Just a couple of things. I do want to give you a COVID update, and I'll do that here in just a second. Just a couple of reminders, general announcements. This week, our K-5 and our 6-8 teachers are participating in virtual parent-teacher conferences and giving parents updates on how students are doing so far, and also talking to parents about anything that we can do between now and the end of the school year to help students close that achievement gap. We'll also be discussing with parents summer school options as we get closer to the end of the school year. So just wanted to say thank you to our teachers and our administrative staff this week in our schools, because it's a lot of extra time to set up these parent-teacher conferences and work through those various meetings on Zoom. So appreciate the participation of our parents and our teachers. The other announcement I have for you is that we'd like to move our second meeting in March. Our second meeting in March was scheduled for March 23rd, our second board meeting, and we'd like to move that to March 30th. We believe that one extra week will help us a little bit. March 23rd is right after we get back from break, and so we just wanted a little extra time to prepare for that meeting, which is why we're asking to move it to March 30th. So hopefully that'll work for the majority of board members, but just wanted to let the board know that that meeting is being changed. I'll give you a brief update on COVID. I'm going to share my screen here. Got some exciting news to share this evening, and I'll go through that in just a second, but I know that's very hard for folks to see that are in the boardroom. Let me see if I can make it a little bit bigger. If you're on Zoom, hopefully you can see that. All right, there we go. So these are the indicators we've been looking at since when I looked back at these. I think we started looking at these in October or November. So you can go all the way back and find these data sheets from months ago if you're interested. But I find these sheets really helpful. It just kind of gives us a snapshot of how things are going across the district. So the first thing we look at is the number of new cases. At the end of last week, we had 5 new cases. That's significantly lower than it has been in previous weeks. We've seen declining number of new cases for about the last 3 weeks. We also track the number of active cases, and as of Monday, when we tracked the active cases, we had 2 active cases in our district. And so I compared that with the number of active cases per 10,000 in the county, and we're significantly lower than that. We also track route of transmission, and the new cases we had last week, the majority of them, transmission occurred outside of school. 80% of those 5 cases occurred outside of school. We also track the number of close contacts. This has significantly dropped. If you'll recall from my last report, we had close to 100 to 120 close contacts a few weeks ago. Significantly dropped last week. We had 17 students or staff members that were identified as close contacts last week across the school district. Staffing is looking significantly better. The previous report I gave you, we had some concerns because some of our staff had received second vaccines, and that caused some absences at school. But last week definitely looked a lot better in terms of staffing. Our staffing numbers are doing pretty well. And then, of course, our contact tracing, with only 5 cases, we're able to contact trace those cases fairly quickly. I wanted to share that just as an update. If you're interested in previous weeks, they're available on our website, but that's the one for the week ending March 5th, which was last Friday. The real exciting news, though, and something we're preparing for, we've been preparing for now for, oh boy, about 7 or 8 days, I think, is the vaccine clinic. Starting tomorrow, we will have a mass vaccine clinic on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday for our staff. This includes our teaching staff and our support staff, so every frontline staff person in the district, which is over 1,300 staff members. We won't have to vaccinate all 1,300 because several have already received their vaccine. But about a week and a half ago, we were notified from Granite Pharmacy that they would be able to provide enough vaccine for us this week so we could vaccinate our entire staff. So that starts tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock in the morning. We've got several staff members that are busily right now over at Sentinel High School setting up for that. And we appreciate the support of Granite Pharmacy, as well as the County Health Department, who is lending several of their vaccinators to us tomorrow to help with this. So it's exciting for us. We did a sign-up process for teachers. When we got through all of our teaching staff, we also did a sign-up process for any bus drivers at Beach Transportation, because we felt like that was another good step to make sure that they're vaccinated. So we're working through all of that, and our staff is excited. I think our clinic tomorrow is full. We still had a few spots on Thursday and Friday, but by Friday afternoon, we should be through, 90% of our staff should be done. So that'll be exciting for all of us. Just wanted to report that to the board, and that's all the information I have.
Thank you. And now we move on to the consent agenda. There's one item on it. If an item is placed on the consent agenda, it means it's typically a routine matter that we see on a regular basis that is more perfunctory than it is anything else. And so it is placed on the consent agenda, which means there will be no board discussion. So no trustees will be discussing the item. And just for public information, if any trustee would like an item to come off the consent agenda, they just need to make a simple request. And so with that, there's one item, which is to acknowledge one MCPS student attendance agreement, where this is a student who has been at, or who is attending school in another district. And so with that, is there a motion to approve a motion to approve acknowledgement of the MCPS student attendance agreement that's in our packet? Moved by trustee Avgaris. Is there seconded by trustee Hobbins? And as I indicated, there is no board discussion. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, then all trustees in favor of the motion to acknowledge the MCPS student who is in attendance in a different district, please indicate by raising your hand. And trustee Vogel, I don't know if you can raise your hand again, or if you just want to say whether you vote yes or no.
Vogel is yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that is unanimous as to all trustees present. Let me turn the page. And then we move on to 2 items. I believe we discussed them at the last board meeting as information-only items, so that the trustees would have a preview of the resolutions 2021-6E and 2021-7S. And so there's separate items because one is a K-12 action item and one is all trustees' action items. So Pat, if you want to provide any additional background concerning the elementary resolution.
Thank you, Chair Holland. So these have become annual items since 2017 when the legislature required school boards to provide notice of their intent to increase permissive levies on these four funds. The four budgeted funds are listed: the Adult Education Fund, Building Reserve Fund, Transportation Fund, and Tuition Fund. And so by March 31st, school boards need to adopt a resolution similar to the one that's attached and provide this resolution as notice to the taxpayers of intent to increase permissive levies. So on page 27, you'll see that there's very little change in the permissive levies for these funds. On page 27, the resolution for the elementary district identifies increase in the transportation fund of $119,000 and then a small increase in the adult ed fund of $4,400. The permissive levies in the building reserve and tuition fund are the same. Also listed is the estimated change in mills and estimated tax impact. The change in mills is less than 1. With a $2.58 estimated annual increase in taxes on a home with a $200,000 tax value. Interrelated with this requirement is two other statutes. One is 20-9-502, which authorizes the creation of a building reserve subfund. That subfund is intended to tackle or to authorize the permissive levy in order to perform major maintenance work that's identified in a different statute, 20-9-525. And how those statutes interrelate is they provide for specific work to be done for code upgrades, major maintenance, roofing, HVAC, and critical repairs. And the 20-9-525 allows the state or authorizes the state to contribute towards those projects. So for last year, we had we had levied, as indicated here in the elementary, $381,840, and then the state provided a match, if you will, of $197,000. And so the way that match works is the state earmarks a certain dollar amount that's allocated among districts that have authorized permissive levies, and it also makes that allocation based upon relative tax value of districts compared to the state taxable value. So the benefit of keeping these permissive levies in play is that there's also a state match, and it's not really a match, but there's a formula that provides state dollars. So the resolution also identifies as required by the statute that proposed upgrades with the permissive levy in the building reserve, and you'll see 3 items listed. Upgrades to HVAC controls at Paxson, CS Porter, and Russell. Upgrade to fire system at Chief Charlo, Paxson, and Jefferson. And critical repairs to Prescott Elementary School. HVAC controls, these are upgrades that weren't performed in the bond projects. These are converting pneumatic controls to electronic controls. This allows us to remotely manage the airflow and the temperature of our HVAC system. Also allows us to capture data relating to the performance of the HVAC system. The fire system upgrades are code upgrades. These also weren't performed as part of the bond. These projects weren't large enough to require fire system upgrades, but we're trying to tackle those in all the buildings. They have been tackled in some of the buildings that had major upgrades as part of the bond. And finally, the Prescott critical repairs is for the roof drainage system. It's really something that needs to get done, or we experienced quite a few leaks in that building, so that's also a critical repair. Happy to answer any questions.
Trustee Olperson? And then I'll look to see if any hands are raised virtually.
Thanks, Chair Holland. Pat, one of the things that the list of upgrades that you've talked about, are those the list that Burley has spoke to us about, in how he has multiple building facility upgrades and different things like that? Is that what this list is from?
It is, and that list we presented to the board in 2019, and then you upgrade it update it every 5 years. It is a fluid list, so these are his priorities, though, to answer that question.
And a quick follow-up. Okay, one of the things that I've talked about it before, is I really think equity across the board is really important at our buildings. And in our middle schools, CS Porter does not have a cafeteria, and it wasn't part of the bond project. And I really think that's something that we should really look at and make sure that our middle schools are equitable across the board, especially access to a cafeteria. That's not the gym.
Thanks. And did someone, I don't know if Trustee Mercer had his hands up, or if anyone participating virtually has any questions for Pat? Not seeing any hands up. So the recommendation is for a motion to approve Resolution 2021-6E under the terms that Pat just described. Is there such a motion to do so? Moved by Trustee Lorenzen. Is there a second? Seconded by Trustee Avgaris. Is there any board discussion? Trustee Hobbins?
Thank you, Chair Holland. I just have a question. In regards to Trustee Oldperson's comment, is there a way that we can change this so that we can start to talk about those kinds of improvements to provide for more equity at our schools? Or is this like an unchangeable thing where we just have to go forward with this or nothing?
And since Trustee Lorenzen?
Well, since I can talk now, these are maintenance items. I think that if there was going to be a change, physical change at the school like that, that would be a capital improvement. And during the bond projects, there were conversations at CS Porter, and the community, the teachers and stuff made that decision. And I don't know why they did. I know they spent a huge amount of money repairing that sunken, they had like sunken band room or something that ate a big chunk of their budget. But I think it'd be valuable to know why they chose to do that. But it isn't a maintenance item, it's a capital item.
Any other trustee comments or discussion? I'm not seeing any hands raised from trustees participating via Zoom. Is there any public comment? I'm not seeing any hands up. Are you, Hatton? Okay, so no public comment. And so this is a K-12 action item. So all K-12 trustees in favor of the motion to, let me get the right terminology, adopt Resolution 2021-6E, please indicate by raising your hand. And that looks like it's unanimous as to all K-12 trustees present. And then we, pardon?
Can we request that the administration put an agenda item on the next meeting to review the decisions that were made around the rebuild of CS Porter, so we understand how we got here?
Sure. We set the agenda the week before every meeting, so we'll be having that meeting probably just after spring break, because the next meeting we are going to move to the 30th, so that will give ample opportunity. So with that, I think we took the vote. It was unanimous, so we're moving on to 8A2, which is the parallel Resolution 2021-7S. Is there anything to, other than there's different items to be repaired, do you want to provide same background and then explain the projects?
You bet. Thanks, Chair Holland. And exactly similar background in terms of the statutes at play. And really to the question of the types of projects that are covered, the statute I mentioned, 20-9-525, references First, the facility condition report projects, which are safety, damage, wear out codes and standards. And then beyond that, it's updates with focus on operational efficiencies, and they really are in the repair maintenance category: roofing systems, heating, air conditioning, plumbing, electrical, and other critical repairs. And that's part of the 20-9-525. And so those projects that we identified for the high school are listed on this resolution. And you'll see that the listed are the roofing system at Hellgate High School. It's part of the roofing system. The upgrade to the HVAC controls, this is similar to that in the elementary for the Paxson and Porter and Russell, and then the fire system at Seeley Swan High School. And again, the fire system upgrade is a code upgrade that wasn't completed as part of the bond project, and that one is very much an alarm system and a voice control system. So it's a voice activated system that works in concert with your safety and security system. The high school numbers, last year, as this year, the levy is $201,000, and last year the state contribution was $61,982, and that number is expected to go up slightly this year. It's progressively increasing the allocation from the state. However, there's more schools that are participating, so happy to answer any questions regarding these projects.
Anyone have any questions for Pat? I'm looking to see. I don't see any hands raised. So the recommendation is that there is a motion to approve Resolution 2021-7S under the terms that Pat just described. Is there such a motion? Moved by Trustee Lorenzen and seconded by Trustee Oldperson. Is there any board discussion? Is there any public comment? Seeing none, then all trustees in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 2021-7S, please indicate by raising your hand or by saying yes.
Vogel is yes.
And so that is unanimous as to all trustees present at the meeting. Then we move on to an information item, which is the Statement of Qualifications for Professional Architectural and Engineering Services for Capital Improvement Projects. I think we've seen similar topics in the past, Pat, and I don't know how cyclical it is, but if you want to walk us through this, it's information only tonight, and then I assume at a later point there would be an action item. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
Thanks, Chair Holland. So and you're right, this is cyclical. So the last time we ran a statement of qualifications for IDIQ services. These are indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity services in the professional engineering architect category. So 5 years ago, we asked for qualifications for architects, special systems, electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, hazardous materials, structural engineers, and geotechnical engineers. And we'd be doing, and we made these selections for a 5-year period, and that period is up. The opportunity here is for these professional organizations to submit their qualifications. We would select up to 4 or 5 per category, I believe 4, and based upon specific category that's cited. And then as projects come up in the $2 million or less category, then we can look to these professional service providers to provide that basic, or the underlying, not basic, but the underlying engineering and architect services for us. Before the project threshold was 1.5 million, as reflected in the background. We've increased that to 2 million, just based upon the costs of projects over this 5-year period. They've gone up based upon material costs and whatnot pretty extensively. So as mentioned, we would bring back our recommendation likely at the end of April, first part of May. happy to answer any questions.
Anyone have any questions? I do have one, Pat, even though it's not an action item tonight. When it's happened in the past, has there been a situation where just one business has submitted a qualifying bid, and so they pretty much de facto get the bids?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. We had one where there were two, and so it's a real specialized field, the geotechnical engineering. And really, I think by the time we started working on projects, one of them had backed out, so we were down to one. And I think very specialized areas, but otherwise, there's usually 4 to 6 applicants, and some I don't believe worked on any of our projects, even though they're qualified. And part of it is the selection based upon availability and price and the relationship of the work they do to the work we need. So I'd anticipate a similar level of participation.
Thanks. Any other questions? I'm just looking for hands up on Zoom. See no other questions, then this is an information-only item, but is there any public comment? I also don't see any hands being raised at this time. So we'll move on to B1, which is to approve the personnel report. And this is the personnel report for which month, Dave?
For the month of March.
Okay, month of March. I just didn't see the month mentioned in the agenda. And anything unusual or anything you want to point out?
No, it's a routine monthly personnel report.
So with that, is there a motion to approve the items on the personnel report? Moved by trustee Avgaris. Is there a second? Seconded by trustee Oldperson. As is the case, and as I explain each time, that we are taking action on the personnel report, neither the trustees nor the public would be commenting on individuals in the personnel report, but if there's any general comment that anyone would like to make on the board first. And I'm not seeing any hands going up. Oh, trustee, thank you. I forgot to look right.
Just a quick question, and I guess I could have asked it during the superintendent's report. Do the subs for MCPS, do they qualify for the or the vaccine as well?
Yes, they do.
And so with that, is there any other comment? Any public comment with the same caution? Seeing none, then all trustees in favor of the motion to approve the items on the personnel report for March, please indicate by raising your hand or saying yes.
Vogel is yes.
And so that is unanimous as to all trustees present, either via Zoom or at the boardroom. And then we move on to 9A, which is just a quick reminder on the superintendent evaluation process and evaluation tool. So first, I had discussed with Dr. Watson that we do his evaluation in April, and so we're going to be doing it at the April 27th board meeting, the second meeting in April. And so those are typically it's done in executive session. And so I think I will collaborate with Tracy and make sure that everyone has the current evaluation tool that we're using. There are some pages at the end of it that we'll probably eliminate because they don't really apply, and so we'll get that out early. The process is that you fill it out either electronically and email a copy to me, or just physically fill it out and drop it off, and I will collect them. And then it would be nice to have them done before the 27th, and so you can bring your copy with you to the meeting and either hand it to me or mail it in ahead of time, as long as you keep some kind of electronic or printed out copy. And so then the second part of this topic is the evaluation tool. And so you'll recall about 3 meetings ago, I think it was about 3, I was looking for volunteers to help take a look at the current evaluation tool and see if there is a better model out there. And so Trustee Wake had volunteered, and I volunteered, and I've been looking, and I think I have talked with Trustee Wake as well, and the tools that I've looked at that have been created at the national and professional level are pretty much the same as ours. You know, they're not any shorter. In some cases, they're a little bit longer. And so I wasn't really able to come up with a model that I would be comfortable saying this is a really great alternative. And Trustee Wake, please go ahead and weigh in here if you have found anything that you think that can be brought forward. No.
I haven't found anything yet.
Okay, so as a consequence of that, since our Dr. Watson's contract goes from July 1st to June 30th, then I probably at the meeting on the 27th of April, when we'll do it in public session because it's a board item, but I'd be looking at maybe another volunteer to help with Trustee Wake for going forward and working with Dr. Watson to see if you can come up with something, since I will no longer be on the board. And so it seems like current board members should really be the ones that are looking into the evaluation tool that they would be evaluating Dr. Watson with come July 1st. And so it's just a heads up, I'll be looking for a volunteer, hopefully, for someone who has a little bit of time over the course of the summer to either decide we'll just stick with the evaluation tool, or the board would stick with the evaluation tool we're using and maybe just tweak it a little bit, or see if someone else other than Trustee Wake and I, who have been looking quite a bit, can find something out there that is a far preferred version of an evaluation tool. So that's just a heads up for everybody. And so with that, we move on to public comment on non-agenda items. We offer public comment opportunity at the beginning and end of every board meeting. So if anyone there who's joined the meeting didn't have a chance to make public comment at the beginning, you can make it at this time too. And just a caution, keep your comments to 3 minutes. We would prefer, and if you can say your first and last name and spell either your first or last name if it has an unusual spelling. And I see that Nick, I'm probably not going to pronounce your name correctly, Kujawa, has a hand raised. So go ahead and unmute Mr. Kujawa and state your name and provide comment on any non-agenda item.
Thank you, Trustee Holland, and trustees, hopefully you can hear me. My name is Nick Kujawa, Nickkujawa. I'm the parent of a rising 9th grader who's going to be attending Hellgate Elementary this fall. And I'm just wanted to comment on the IB review process as part of the strategic plan. Hopefully you all received the email that I had sent following the watching of the video that was presented from your last board meeting. My concern is that I want to make sure that the superintendent, kind of the administration, and the Board of Trustees is not throwing out the baby with the bathwater in their review of the IB program. My children have done it at Lewis and Clark, Washington Middle School, and we hope to be doing it at Hellgate High School. Hellgate is the oldest IB program in Missoula, and I just really encourage, I believe that the high school IB program is really the culmination and is probably the most important aspect of it. And I understand there's budgetary concerns with having it through all the program. Having experienced it at elementary, middle school levels, I would say that if there is a need for budget cuts, I would encourage cuts at those levels and maintain it at the high school level at Hellgate. Thank you very much for your time.
And thank you for those comments. And with that, we'll adjourn the regular board meeting and move into a board work session. And I see Deborah Silk is on Zoom, and she is the MTSBA representative who has been working with the district last January before we couldn't really meet anymore. We had been participating in 2 very robust sessions about setting the strategic plan for the next 5 years, because the current plan that we're operating under as a district and as a board is about to sunset. And so, Dr. Watson, I'll let you and Deborah kind of explain the process that we're trying to revive.
You bet. Thank you, Chair Holland, and thanks to Deborah Silk for being on with us this evening. Also, thanks to a number of people that have worked really hard on this. Hatton Patton Littman has done an excellent job just getting us to this point as well and put in a lot of extra time. We also engaged recently with our leadership team, our entire leadership team across the district, including the union leadership, to discuss some of the drafts that you're going to see this evening. Before we jump right into the drafts and kind of tell you where we're at, so as you recall from last year, we had several public listening sessions. Deborah Silk took the notes from those listening sessions and started creating some draft statements. And she was showing us those draft statements earlier this school year at the administrative level. And one thing that I got to studying quite a bit was this core ideology. And the core ideology is the core purpose and the core values. And I want to just take a second, if I can, and just talk about the importance of these statements and the reason that we want to make sure the board is engaged at this point in time. So when you start talking about core ideology, it's really two things. It's the core purpose and the core values. And what's interesting about both of these is they really need to stand the test of time, that they should be part of our strategic plan for a long time from now. So you'll have strategies and objectives and programs that come and go, but really the core purpose and the core values really stand the test of time and would be around for many, many years. And so I want to make sure that the board and in fact, our entire community has a chance to really flesh these out and make sure that there's something you can stand behind, because they should really be in place long after, this board is changed over or superintendents have changed over. The core purpose and the core values should still be part of our district. So just, and I also gave you an article to read as part of the board packet that talks a little bit more about the importance of core purpose and core value. But just to summarize, the core purpose is defined as a fundamental reason for the existence of the organization. It doesn't just describe the outputs, it captures the soul of the organization. So many times we talk about programs in our district, but we don't ever stop to talk about, what's really the soul of our organization, what really drives us as an organization. So I gave you a couple of examples here, and core purposes are usually pretty short. So Disney, their core purpose is to make people happy. And so just a couple of examples to think about. I'm not saying that our core purpose is going to be that short, but it should be succinct enough so that everyone kind of understands it and can remember it going forward. And again, the core purpose is one of those things that really stands the test of time. It's out there on the horizon. You never actually achieve it, but it's something you're always working towards. The other one I wanted to talk about was the core values. The core values are really statements that are like guiding principles. If you ask the school district what we stand for, that's the core values. It's usually 3 to 5 statements. And so when we show you our drafts, I would encourage you to look at the headings on the drafts, because really we want to get those headings correct and make sure that they represent our district. And again, it's basically our set of beliefs or our fundamental beliefs. They're held by, everyone and something we can all stand behind as values. But they also stand the test of time. So one of the things to think about is that when we start talking about our resources and talking about our programs, we should be able to hold up anything that we're doing in the district against these core values and ask ourselves, does this activity that we're going to do, or does this expenditure that we're going to make, does it meet our core values? So just a couple of thoughts as we start thinking about these drafts. And on page, on page 35 of your agenda, we actually have some draft statements, and I just want to tell you where these came from. So as I said, Deborah Silk compiled a lot of the notes last year from our listening sessions with our community. We sort of whittled them down into core purpose examples and core value statements. They've gone through a couple of iterations with our administrative team at the central office. And then with our larger group of administrators from across the district, and the both union presidents were involved in that step. But I just wanted you to know that they've gone through several iterations. They're still not perfect, but like, for example, under core purpose, we've basically, whittled it down to 3 possible examples that you could talk about and think about. Under core values, again, I'd ask you to focus on the headings. We want to make sure those headings are match what you think our core values are, and hopefully we haven't left anything out. But I just want to make sure that we spend the time that's needed on this as a school district, and if it means we have to slow down just a little bit, I think it's worth it in the long run, because these are intended to really, as I said before, stand the test of time and be around for a long time. We might make small tweaks to some of the language going forward, but really the essence of the purpose and the values really should be around for a long time. So I'm going to let Deborah just add anything she wants to that, and then we're hoping we can get some feedback from you all on these drafts. Deborah?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Holland and Rob. I appreciate the opportunity to be with all of you tonight. I wish I could be there in person, and I'm sure that will happen hopefully sooner rather than later. I would agree with everything that Rob just said in terms of sort of stepping back and really analyzing and articulating what your core ideology is, because that really drives everything that your district will be engaging in or not engaging in moving forward. So I agree with Rob in terms of spending a little more time on core purpose and core values. And Marcia, as you pointed out early on, we started this process in January of 2020, I believe. And we had some really fantastic sessions with trustees and with staff and with community members and students. And it's unfortunate that, number one, we're all living in this pandemic, but I think too, we want to be thinking about sort of the silver lining in what's to come out of this. And so I don't think that this is necessarily a bad delay when you're talking about developing a strategic and visionary plan for Missoula County Public Schools. In fact, I think what it does, as Rob said, it gives us, you guys, a little bit of time to really analyze and look at what's in front of you in terms of core purpose and core values, and make sure that you get that piece right before we start talking about goal areas, okay? Because remember, your core ideology, your core purpose, your core values, those are not goal statements. And even though they drive everything that you do, and even though you can improve in all of them, they don't change over time. You know, the core purpose of Missoula County Public Schools, and I think you can see from the 3 different iterations that Rob talked about, you want to make sure that it inspires you, that it really is the soul of your organization, and that it is at the core of who you are. Same thing with the core values. We did get some really good input, I think, from your administrative staff. And remember, when you, and I'm talking about the board, when you guys embarked on this process, you wanted to make sure that the board had their fingerprints all over this. You wanted to make sure that this was a board-driven process with, of course, the notion that you have staff input and that you have community input, and that we do this as a collaborative process. But I think tonight, and Rob, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what we're looking for from the board is really feedback on the 3, number one, the 3 iterations of the core purpose that you have in front of you. And just so you know, after our meetings last week with both the administrative staff and the cabinet on February 22 and 26. We put out a survey asking them for their input on the 3 iterations that you see. We had 24 responses back from the administration. And just based upon the input that we received, and understand that it's not necessarily exclusive, but it appeared that a lot of people, in fact, almost half of those, looked at the 3rd iteration, which was to engage all students in a high quality education that inspires and prepares each student for their future success. That tended to be the one that stood out, at least from an administrative staff. But of course, we want to make sure that we get the input of trustees before we move forward on either of these. So, Marcia, Rob, I don't know necessarily how you guys want to go about doing this. My preference would be that we, number one, focus on a proposed core purpose. And remember, these are not wordsmithing exercises. What you want to make sure is that conceptually, you have what you want to see in both the core purpose and the core values. And again, it needs to resonate with all of you. It needs to have meaning. It needs to drive everything that you do. And so we wanted to engage the board in a discussion about your thoughts on the 3 iterations of core purpose, which I think would be step 1. And then, of course, we can look at the draft core values and the headliners that are there. And again, great validation after reworking these. I got some great feedback in terms of what your administration thought about, what it means to be student-centered, what you're talking about when you're talking about opportunities, innovations, safety and inclusion, and community. So with that, and again, Rob and Marcia, if you guys have ideas on the way that you want to see this go, I think what we're looking here for tonight is, in essence, feedback from the board on what they think of the drafts as they appear right now. Understand that everything that we're doing right now is in draft format until such time as the board says, this is ready to go. And remember, when you say this is ready to go, it's just the first step in the process moving forward. Everything in your strategic plan, other than your core purpose and your core values, is intended to be nimble and adaptable. But this is really important to get this right.
Thanks, Deborah. And so I was wondering, I was trying to find it. So what is the current core purpose? I pulled up the MCPS website, and the quick core purpose that's listed under our website is forward thinking, high achieving, just 4 words. And I think that what shows up in the strategic plan is a little bit longer. And if we were in the old boardroom, we would have it up on the board and we could all just look at it. But I think just to understand, what we're moving from and moving to. So
Yes, so the current core purpose is to ensure every student achieves his or her full potential regardless of circumstances and ability. And you'll recall last January and February during the community listening sessions, there was some concerns about the way that was worded. The his and her part of that raised a lot of concerns, and so you'll see some of those changes in what the draft is. And then just as long as we're there, I can tell you the core beliefs, which are very close to the core values from the previous strategic plan, were every child, innovative learning environments, and strong communities. So there was 4 core beliefs.
So does that help everyone to understand what we're moving from and what the board would be formulating in terms of the the core purpose moving forward for the strategic plan for the next, ostensibly for the next 5 years. And I think Deborah brings up a good point. One of the things, because we did have to kind of take a pause because of the pandemic, the way education is delivered, we have discovered had to be very nimble as well. And so it would be good if the core purpose is nimble enough. I don't want to use that word too much, but which captures situations where the unexpected happens and yet MCPS can still deliver a quality public school education. So I don't know if any trustees have any thoughts on the 3 proposals in the draft. I did participate in one of the meetings with all the building principals, and our group came up with a different core principle that's not reflected here, which we thought we were very positive about, so I just pulled that up, and it's not that dissimilar from these, but it was shorter. So anyway, I don't know if anyone has any thoughts. As Deborah said, we're not really trying to wordsmith, although it tends to happen anyway. But generally speaking, I guess from my personal perspective, I'd really love to have a core purpose statement that doesn't use so many lofty adjectives and adverbs that it's almost unachievable, that it sounds good on paper, but actually having meaning that can be understood by everyone in the district. It's just not there. Just like Nike says, let's do it, and you kind of get the idea that they're going to do something. So with that being said, I just open it up for discussion. That's why it's a work session. If you want to make any comments or just chat or whatever, this is the time to do so. So.
I probably wear it on my sleeve, but sort of equality of opportunity is why I'm here. And so the first one to me has each student, it has for all. The third one has all students, but it's like a soft thing. So not to wordsmith, but yeah, to me something that is more on its sleeve from my perspective of equality of opportunity. I think that's what public education is for. So looking at the draft core values, so opportunity has that equitable access, but it's not equal opportunity, it's not equality. In the old one, every child, I hear that. I don't see that in any of the draft core values. The other thing I would say for me, okay, maybe this is coming out of COVID, we talk a lot about proficiency. I hope our goal is not proficiency, right? And so for me, future success, that's kind of proficiency. Full potential is a little bit like, hey, our goal is a little bit more than just proficiency. So those are my off the top comments.
Any other thoughts? Trustee Lorenzen? And, sorry. Trustee Lorenzen, and then Trustee Sturbis has her hand up too.
I actually like the third one. I think it's the district engaging the students. I like that it doesn't seem to have an endpoint. Because really what we're after is lifelong learning skills. It's engaging all students. Without getting too specific about circumstance, I was always a little uncomfortable with that because it felt a little bit like we felt a person's potential depended a lot on what was in their life when they were young, and that's not really true. So I like the third one. I just feel like it leans forward. I mean, it's what the district's going to engage them, so I do like that one.
Thanks. Trustee Sturbis, go ahead.
So I agree. I like the third one too. I think student engagement is key. It needs to be a partnership between the student and the district. Instead of giving something to them, we're working with them. So I think that's key, but I would make it a lot more simpler and just say to engage all students in learning that inspires and prepares each student for their future. I take out the words high quality education, simplified to learning to make it broader. And then I take out the word success. I know you said not to wordsmith, but I think words matter in this case. And I think success is limiting expecting, putting on what success is to one person is different to people. So I think it's better just to keep it simpler. Thank you.
Trustee Sturbis, could you say the first part again? I was trying to take notes. I understand about eliminating the word success, but you also mentioned the first comment.
So instead of instead of saying high quality education, I would just say learning.
Thanks. Any other thoughts? I'm looking for hands remotely. Oh. Trustee Hobbins?
I feel like I have too vague of a comment to even say anything, but what I feel like is missing in all of these is kind of the whole child, the whole student, and talking about connectedness and becoming a good member of society kind of thing. And that's what I would like to see in like a 2-word thing, and I haven't thought of it, but I feel like all of these are talking about preparing a kid like individually to go out there and succeed in everything that they do. That's not talking about what we can do as a school system to make that person a great member of society.
And I think one of the, just a thought, is that the core values often are the meatier part of the core purpose, which reflects on a bigger picture kind of thing. So if you look down below in the draft core of values, I think it's starting to emphasize the kind of things you'd like to see in the core purpose. So as I recall, in both the January 2020 sessions and this more recent session, there was a long discussion about including more of the language you're suggesting, Trustee Hobbins, and people thought it might fit better under core values than in the core purpose. But that's just my one recollection. So I don't know if Deb wants to weigh in or Dr. Watson, but.
Marcia, I would just weigh in on that. And again, I appreciate all of the comments that we're receiving. Just to sort of give you an overview, when we had our meetings with the admin and the cabinet, I guess it was 2 weeks ago now, they felt that what was previously a draft, and it was intentionally stated so, it didn't include an education component. And so it sort of goes to the whole child that you guys are talking about. And again, this is, Rob, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but there were a number of people that participated in our meeting on February 22nd that indicated that they thought that the core purpose had to have an education component in it. Otherwise, from their perspective, it could be the core purpose from any organization. And what they talked about was, look, we want to make sure that this core purpose articulates and identifies the uniqueness that Missoula County Public Schools has. And so that's why you see that high quality education component back in the core purpose.
Trustee Lorenzen?
Yeah, and I don't want to try to shape whatever, but I guess based on my Cold War upbringing, when I hear people say we're going to mold our children into citizens, the hair stands up on the back of my neck. And because our job is to teach. There's other organizations in the community, in these children's lives, whose job it is to make them be citizens, or, these sort of things. So I don't want us, I like that we're just focusing on education. I don't want us to go too far and become more of a state, the state, So that's just a bias, I think, that comes from Cold War experience.
Anyone else have a perspective? I'm looking online as well. Trustee Avgaris.
Thanks. Again, we're not supposed to wordsmith here, but I think the words on I like the third one a lot, actually. I think it makes a lot of sense. The first two, what catches me is the words empower in there. Empower is one of the most powerful words, yet most overused words out there. I don't know that we have the ability on a lot of levels to empower students. That's a family thing. So each of those might grab me a little more if those words were different. But I think at the end of the day, I agree with Diane that I like the number 3. It says everything we need to say, and it does everything that we should strive to do as a school district, in my opinion.
Any other thoughts? I guess I'll just kind of weigh in, having heard this conversation, which has been really helpful for me personally. I like Trustee Service's suggestion to take out the word success. I think that really it's more limiting than it is helpful. But other than that, whether it says high quality education or learning, but I do like the third version the best. So the first two, to me, as Trustee Avgaris indicated, you use words that sound good, but I don't know what additional value they bring to a core purpose statement. So, Trustee McDonald has her hand up. Go ahead, Trustee McDonald.
Okay, I just want to throw my 2 cents in. I prefer the 3. I think that number 3 just kind of rounds off pretty much everything that the core value statements are. That's just my input.
Thanks. Any other thoughts? So to somewhat summarize, and Deb, tell me if this is kind of matches up with what you're thinking. It sounds like the trustees have a fairly strong preference for the number 3 version. I don't know if everyone's in agreement with taking out the word success, but other than that, it sounds like number 3 is the trustees' preferred draft core purpose. And is that correct? I'm speaking for everyone. I see nods in this room, and I'm seeing nods on Zoom. And so I guess the question is success or no success, in or out? Trustee Avgaris?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think success out is a good option.
Does anyone disagree with that? Do they want to keep success in? I don't see any. Trustee Hobbins?
I'm just not so married to the idea that success means the same thing for everybody. So I think success is a general word. We might all have our own biases about what success means, but I think success is a general word that means success. I mean, like we're reaching that full potential and in whatever way that is. Doesn't mean you have to be the head of a Fortune 500 company. It can mean something different for every student. So I'm not going to argue whether it has to be taken out or not, but I don't think that it means one thing.
So Deb, does that give you some direction in terms of?
Yeah, I think it does. And again, very much appreciate the comments. You'll notice too, and I think that there was a comment about it earlier, the first component of this is to engage all students. But the second part of that, and I would agree with the statement that was just made, and it's not up to me about whether or not to leave in the word success or not, but you'll notice that the first part of that is all encompassing and engaging. And then the second part of that focuses on each student, right? So whatever they want for their success. And just in full disclosure too, when we were visiting with the admin staff, I know that some people also struggled with the word prepares. And again, I don't want to get into wordsmithing here. I think in the interest of time and to move along, I think if you guys are okay with this, I wrote down all of your input, and of course there's a recording, I know, of your Zoom meeting. why don't you let Rob and I and even Hatton visit about the input from the board? What we will take from this is that of the three, your preference would be the third core purpose, maybe with some modifications to it. Does that sound like a reasonable means of moving forward at this juncture?
I see heads nodding here mostly. Trustee Mercer, is that okay to move forward in that way? You're okay with that? And then Trustee McDonald and Trustee Sturbis and Trustee Wake, does that seem reasonable? I see nods and thumbs up, so yes, Deb, that seems fine. And
Okay.
And so do we want to move on and just kind of touch upon the core value statements as well? This gets,
Yeah, I think
gets
that we
involved
should-
in
I
a
think-
lot more wordsmithing, but we'll try to. So go ahead, Deb, and just explain where the core value statements, how they developed.
So remember too, the core purpose, as Rob indicated when we first started this discussion, the core purpose and the core values really go together. Your core purpose is who you are and what you stand for. And the values are really, what is it that you value as an organization? I think I referenced this last January and February because I've been asked this question about 1 million times. Should the core values of a school district represent the core values of your community? My response to that is if they don't, then there's a complete disconnect between what your public schools are doing and what your community expects, okay? So with that, when you're talking about value statements, they are beliefs. They also represent your behaviors as you're pursuing your core purpose. Okay, so when we first started this out, we had, in essence, 4 core values before we had the discussion with the admin and cabinet during the week of February 22nd. We had student-centered. We didn't have an opportunities core value, and that came out of the discussions that we had during that week. We did have, it wasn't called innovation at the time. I had it labeled as leadership, and it created a lot of confusion about exactly what that meant. So we modified it, and I think it's a good improvement in terms of what it says. In terms of innovation, we had a safety and inclusion core value, and then we had a community core value. So again, what you're seeing here is a culmination and an iteration of the input that we received back from the admin staff. And when you look at the survey that I administered, we got a lot of what I would characterize as I had them do a Likert scale in terms of whether or not they strongly agree, disagree, or strongly disagree. So Likert scale of 4 on each of these core values. And the overwhelming majority strongly agreed or agreed with these draft core values as presented. So that's sort of the backdrop on the way that these came about. Again, they're in draft form. What I would encourage you to do is really take this in 2 parts. Number 1, as Rob said, look at the headliners. Is student-centered a core value? Probably, I'm guessing, right? Are opportunities a core value of Missoula County Public Schools? Is innovation a core value? Is safety and inclusion a core value? And is community a core value? Okay, so I think your first validation is looking at the headliners and making a call about whether or not that really does represent, again, who you are and what you stand for first. And then if you want, we can take a look at the statements there. And during my first draft of this, the input that I received back from the admin team was, Deborah, you got to cut it back. These are too long. So what I tried to do on my second or third or fourth or maybe 5th iteration, I tried to make sure that we captured everything in one sentence and that we didn't ramble on and on. Okay. So that's what you see in front of you to date.
So does that seem like an appropriate focus for right now is what is in bold? Are those 5 identified core values, are those the 5 overarching values that we see MCPS having over the course of the next at least half a decade? Any thoughts, Trustee Oldperson?
I know we're supposed to look at the bold part, but one of the things, and I know Trustee F. Garris mentioned this about the core purpose examples, is family. Where is family at in any of these? Because I think whatever a family makeup is, I think it should be part of our core values. It does say community, but I think we need to be more intentional with that word because I think that's very important to MCPS. Families.
And just so I understand, when we do talk about the not bolded part, you'd want to include family. And so would you want to do any modification to the term community, which is the introduction to that section?
No, I like what the bolded core value statements are the bolded. I just want to see family somewhere in here.
Okay. I'm just going to make a note of that. Any other thoughts from anybody, just starting with the bigger picture first? Are those okay? Trustee Mercer?
I would just, to me, reiterate that opportunity is softer than I personally feel about equality. It's public education that's supposed to give everybody a shot, and maybe that's in their opportunity, but to me, opportunity is just too soft for my own feelings about that. Community is, if you just told me our value was community, I would think internally. That's what that word would mean to me. It wouldn't mean our place in the world, our place in our families, our place in our state and the people we come from. So for me, community, I mean, we fill it out and then you understand what we're saying with that, but it doesn't to me resonate with our place in the wider world when you just say community alone. I think maybe I'm just egotistical. I think ourselves, but.
Any other thoughts? I think that's a good point. I mean, when you look at community, do you understand it means our place in Missoula, our place in the region, our place in the world, our place in the United States?
Trustee Vogel has her hand raised.
Oh, good. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I have something up on my screen that's preventing. Let me close that out. Go ahead, Trustee Vogel.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I also want to echo what Trustee Mercer said about community. It's very narrow in that it involves just the Missoula community. And I would like to broaden that out to include Sealy Swan and the other outlying areas that feed into Missoula. I think that those areas also need to be recognized somewhere within these statements.
And so
That's
just
it.
to pick everyone's brain, does anyone think of a more encompassing term than community? Trustee Hobbins?
I mean, maybe we talk about like connectedness or something. Because it's funny, everybody else is thinking about broadening the community part, and I was thinking about tightening it in too, to think about the community that is within MCPS. And are we teaching our kids to get along as community members with each other? And so I think that's where my point that I was bringing it up in the wrong spot when we were talking about core purpose. But I think that's where we have, the opportunity to talk about community and connectedness. That doesn't help with
But it
wording.
does. I mean,
that's actually really helpful. I like that.
Sorry, Trustee Oldperson?
I really like what Trustee Hobbins stated because I think one of the things I've seen as a trustee is I want to see more connectedness between the schools, and especially the high schools. I know we're very like Sentinel Spartans, Hellgate Knights. I think a lot of people don't really understand we're one school district, and I really want us to be more connected, interconnected within ourselves as well.
So trustee Lorenzen?
Well, I'm crossing wires. I want to go back to what trustee Mercer said, because when you read the opportunities, it says equitable access to opportunities. That's, like he says, pretty soft. That's like, we're not really recognizing, it's not the same thing as equitable effort on the part of the district. The districts, it says, here it is, you can all have some, but somehow we recognize the disadvantages that people come to us with, and we need to do something more active there as far as equity. So instead of opportunities, I mean, maybe name it equity, because opportunities is kind of like you can lead a horse to water kind of a thing. So I do feel that too, that doesn't say, because we all talk about equity a lot, but how to actually do it should be addressed, so.
Trustee Mercer?
I like connecting it a lot. I think that does more work than community. So the conversation earlier about CS Porter and the cafeteria, if I'm trying to place that in that, where do I say, I value that? And that's what I want something to say. I guess you could call that an opportunity, but it doesn't care. Yes, as somebody, I want to make an argument and point to this and say, this is why we should do this, because we said we believe in opportunities. That doesn't feel that persuasive to me.
So let me see if I can summarize by checking in about so student-centered as a concept, I'm not hearing much dispute that could be included. And innovation and safety and inclusion all seem to be fine. And I have to agree with the comments about opportunity and community. It doesn't capture what I would want those two categories to be captioned in terms of core values. And I did pull up some of the working language from the February meeting that I participated in, and they were very different than this too. So, there's been iterations of input. But Deborah, I don't know if there's a way to take a step back and look and see whether there's a better term than opportunities, and the connectivity, I don't know if that's the right word, but something more along those lines, which would mean we'd probably then look at the focus under that fifth title a little differently, because we'd want to include some additional thoughts.
Yeah, no, I think that's all good input. Let me ask you this question on what's now labeled opportunities, because I'm hearing different things, and I just want to make sure I understand. So valuing equitable access to opportunities, I think, is different than, and I can't remember which trustee had said it earlier, that what they were wanting to see was equality of educational opportunity. And remember, equality of educational opportunity is actually, in fact, I just did a training on this today. It's embedded in Article 10, Section 1 of the Montana Constitution. And I don't mean to give you a history lesson here, but in the Helena Elementary case back in 1989, the court talked about that is a guarantee for each person in this state. And the court even went so far to say, it's not just the responsibility of the state, it's the responsibility of the state, of the legislature, of local communities and school boards. So are you guys thinking that you want some concept of equality of educational opportunity to reign in one of these core values? And if so, we can most certainly, again, working with Rob and Hatton, go back and take a different look at the second core value. And remember, these are not either in any order of priority. But we most certainly can go and take a second look at that second core value currently labeled opportunity and the fifth one currently labeled community. But I'd like to get further input on the the second one.
And I saw trustee Service had her hand up, so I don't know if she had a comment related to what we're talking about now or something earlier. Trustee Service?
Yeah, I was gonna say that, I liked it when someone suggested equity as opposed to opportunities. And then I also like the word connectedness or connectivity for the community, or maybe somehow relationships. But I really like this discussion over those two topics. I think it's making it more relevant.
Thanks. Trustee Hobbins?
Yeah, I think this is really along the lines of what trustee Service said, but I think what's missing in the word opportunities is the equality part. So if we say something like equality in opportunity as the bolded words there, because it can be more, because I agree, opportunities is not descriptive enough of what we're trying to do there. It has to do everything with the equality of those opportunities. So.
And so I'll just ask Deborah, since she's a lawyer, is there a difference legally in using the term equitable and equal? Because I believe, I remember that that's a really big deal, and you have to be pretty careful about which word you use.
Yeah, that's what I was going to weigh in on. I mean, the administrative team had a long discussion around that very issue. Equal being, a lot of times people see equal as the same everywhere. And obviously, if you look at our 9 elementary schools, just because of the culture of each school and the priorities of each school, they're not always going to be equal, and I don't think we want them to be equal. That's just my opinion. But equity really speaks to making sure that every school has a strong, comprehensive program that meets students' needs, and that's really what equity is about. It's not being equal, but it's being cognizant of what every student needs.
I don't know if you wanted to add to that, Deb, at all?
No, I would say there is a clear distinction between equal and equity. Equity is more of a balanced and fairness, and when you're talking about opportunities for kids, equity does not mean that every student gets the same thing. And I think, when you're talking about personalized learning for students, there is a distinction between those. I would agree with what Rob said. And I think even the way it's worded in our Constitution, and again, you have to be careful because remember, again, just a history lesson, when the court decided the Helena Elementary case back in 1989, that was a case of equity, right? And what the court in essence did and what the legislature did after that was they compressed the spending per pupil. And they said in essence, and I'm paraphrasing here, if you want, everything to be equal, then everybody's getting the same. And then of course we saw our adequacy lawsuit in 2005 because we went on a decade-long spiral of the legislature not adequately funding our schools. So there is a distinction between those. And I think it's up to you guys in terms of the way to phrase that. I know that when the admin staff met, they did talk about opportunities in terms of, well, there were a lot of discussions about ensuring that kids had equitable access to those opportunities, but not necessarily equal.
Sorry, did it backwards. So any thoughts about, it seems like it'd be more practical and meaningful to use the word equitable because it means really that we want everyone to have basically equal opportunity, but not equal in a sense that it's like the bare minimum of opportunity, but that it's fair across the district. And I was trying to look up some quickly. I need a thesaurus here. Anyway, just a different term that you could use for opportunity. or a different adjective to describe opportunity, because opportunities just, it's not sitting well with me personally. So Trustee Mercer, I don't know if that's on, we can put that back on Rob's and Deborah's plate, but.
Yeah, I mean, probably my favorite slogan of all is equal justice under law, and that is a hard equal. But I totally hear the point that equitable, if you say equal, that could be pushed back on you in a way you don't like somewhere down the road, and equity gives you room. I like the word I think equity is good to me. I could even have it say just equity. But, yeah.
So you would just change the word to equity? Yeah, I like that. Deb, would that, I mean, does that create any problems?
No, that was actually, after listening to all of you and your input, that was actually my thought. In fact, I wrote it down here. That was what I had written as well. And Rob, I don't know what maybe you think about that. I mean, we can, you know, when you're looking at these, you want to make sure that you have the headliners right before the description. I think it fits with the discussions even that the admin staff had.
Yeah, we actually started off with equity, quite honestly, and then the admin staff wanted to be a little broader, and that's why they went with opportunities, because they thought it captured more. You could change it to equity and then just take out that word equitable. You could just say equity. We value access to opportunities where each student receives high-quality, comprehensive education. Just reads a little better.
Trustee Mercer, and then Trustee McDonald.
Sorry.
So,
One brief food for thought. Safety and inclusion are not necessarily the same thing to me. Inclusion hopefully has safety benefits, but those are actually really, to me, fairly different things.
and Trustee McDonald, do you have your hand up too?
Okay, mine is regarding the fifth one, if we're done talking about opportunities. Are we done talking about opportunities?
Well, it sounds like, would everyone, I mean, generally speaking, would everyone be okay changing it to equity or something, you know, I don't know if it needs some other add-on, but equity seems fine and a better, I like what Trustee Mercer said. So why don't we, if it's okay with you, Deb and Dr. Watson, we'll move on to discussing community. I mean, or what we can substitute for that basic capturing statement as to that core value. So go ahead, Trustee McDonald.
Okay, so I was just like kind of, you know, referencing to how they incorporated safety and inclusion together. Couldn't we do connectivity and community and kind of incorporate the definitions of those two together? Do you understand what I'm talking about?
Yeah, we can definitely do that. What I'm hearing you guys say is, number one, the fifth core value, you want it broader than just community. You know, that, and I think after listening to you guys, I would agree with you that it needs to be more expansive than the Missoula community. I also like, again, without wordsmithing, I think what you're talking about, and you guys have already thrown these terms out in terms of connectivity or relationships, I think that we can broaden that fifth core value, including the headliner.
Trustee Mercer?
And yeah, broader, but also more, I mean, to me, connectedness talks about that we have this hybrid district where we're having people feed in, and that's connected. We have schools that, they're not really the same community, but we want them connected. We have a world that we're all, I mean, this is Missoula, right? We believe we're a part of a broader world. So I think all that connectivity is, it just feels like it's doing more lifting to me than community.
And I'm just looking for hands up on Zoom. So would this work with the trustees and with Deb and with Dr. Watson? Rather than trying to step into the more detailed, not bolded part tonight, if we can have a discussion on a different night, because if we can see what Deb is able to work out with some reiterations of the bolder words, with the ideas that there should be some mention of family, there should be some mention, for example, we've got feeder schools, we've got Sealy Swan, just things like that. And if anyone wants to take a quick look at some of the language after the bolded core value statements with suggestions about things to perhaps try to weave in. And just as an aside before I call on or acknowledge Trustee Oldperson, I did pull up what was presented to us at the February 21st, and it was 3 to 5 sentences in each group. And so Deb has done a remarkably good job of just really boiling down the essence of what we were discussing on that day to a much more concise things. But I think we are hearing that there's some words that have been left out and some concepts that have been left out, as Trustee Vogel pointed out. And so now, Trustee Oldperson, go ahead.
I really like that Trustee Mercer pointed out safety and inclusion. And I do feel like those inclusion should be by itself, I feel like, and I don't know if you were just trying to stick to 5 value statements, but I do feel like those should be separate.
I don't have any problem at all separating those out. I think that, having 4, 5, or even 6 core values, you want to make sure that we don't get so many core values, and I'm not suggesting that we're there, okay? That they tend to lose their importance, right? Because there's a lot of, and just attribute it even to your own personal lives. All of us have a lot of values, right? But what you want these to represent is for somebody looking at what Missoula County Public Schools is all about and what you value. You want those to be headliners, and you want them to mean something and stick out to people. And again, it doesn't matter to me whether you want safety and inclusion together. I know that the first iteration of it, the admin, and it was a valid criticism, said, look, how many times do you have to reference the word safe in the description? So they wanted it to say and to mean that not only physically safe, but also where people feel welcome, wanted. And so that's where the safety and inclusive part came about.
And I think you could categorize the entire item as inclusion and then have safety embedded within that. I can see a couple of places in there already where we've got safe. But for example, the last part of that statement where our students and staff feel safe and valued, I think safety is part of being included. And I do believe the premise of the value is all about, that feeling welcome and feeling included.
Does anyone think just taking out the word, well, 2 words, safety and inclusion, and titling that section inclusion, but referencing a safe environment as being something that supports an inclusive environment? I don't have any personal thoughts one way or the other. They're somewhat related and somewhat different, so I'm trying to grapple with that. Trustee Mercer?
So we're just coming out we're in a year of COVID. That to me is safety. Inclusion is not just the passive that people aren't bullied, it's that we as a society benefit from everything that people can bring, and that's more than just a passive, you're welcome. So let's think, someone's been saying to me recently, so diversity is getting, you get to go to the dance. Inclusion's being asked to dance, and it's that it's something more than that. So we had was that 2 weeks ago, or sorry, a month ago, I forget the name of the entity, but that we value that, right? Right? And so I want something that says that. in an unmistakable way. To me, inclusion does that as a single bold word. But safety is, it's not just, I don't know, that makes it seem just more like it's just a bullying thing or something. I think it's a little bit more aspirational than that.
I guess I'm being persuaded that we should keep both safety and inclusion as separate topics and have 6, and that's not a bad thing. And, not have any more, but keeping, especially because we are experiencing, we had, pertussis problems, we've had safety in terms of entering buildings, considerations when the bond was being passed. So safety has risen in terms of considerations that schools have to keep the students safe in the school. But inclusion is very different, and I think, if we can come back to this on a different time and maybe let Deb and Rob and maybe Cabinet come up with some additional concepts, because I like what Trustee Mercer just said. Getting to go to the dance versus being asked to go to the dance are 2 very different things. So Trustee Hobbins, and then I'll look.
I'm just going to make a quick suggestion that safety can be its own thing and inclusion can be something that can be a part of the community and connectedness idea of the last point here. I don't have the right words for it yet, but I have a feeling that those things can all go together better than safety and inclusion go together.
That seems like a better way to include it if it's not included as a separate standalone topic. So if Deb and Dr. Watson can look at whether or not it can be melded into what we're going to call connectiveness, maybe, then connectivity sounds like you're putting in a plug to something. But somewhere along those lines, and move the concepts of inclusive environment there, or if it just doesn't fit and it needs to be a 6th standalone, because it really needs a little bit additional explanation as to how it is important to the district as a core value. Does that make, I'm looking for hands that aren't disagreeing. I see mostly nods in the boardroom. So does that give you, Dr. Watson and Deb, some direction to go on? And then maybe,
Yeah, it does.
Does it,
Yep.
does it make sense to have the group, our trustees, have a second workshop at the end of, I don't know, whatever time frame you come up, next meeting or the meeting after that? I think it would be more focused at that point and perhaps shorter, but go ahead, Trustee Avgaris.
Yeah, just one quick thing, and I don't know if this is a core value, but after what we've been through the last year, I feel like technology should be a core value in some way. I know we have innovation, and maybe it falls under innovation, but a year ago today to where we are today, to know our blind spot of technology, to keep that as a core value going forward. It's only going to grow in the lives of not only our staff, but our students going forward. So I feel like that could be melded in here somehow.
Yeah, that seems like it actually is a good fit for innovation, because if you would have told me would be running 3 different organizations on something called Zoom a year ago, I would have been quite surprised. And so I think that's a really good point. But it seems like innovation would include responding to and adopting technology that helps us be innovative. Does that work for you, Deborah and Rob, to add that or some aspect of that thought in?
Yeah, I would agree. I think that technology is an example or a form of innovation. I would agree. I think we can work that into the innovation core value.
Any other thoughts other than I'll get together with Rob and see, when he and Deb, and I don't know if you want to run it through the cabinet, have some additional thoughts. So it might be 1 month from now that we'd be discussing this, or it might be 2 weeks from now. Does that make sense to everybody? And I'm looking for anyone disagreeing on Zoom. I'm not seeing any hands or heads or shaking no. I see some people smiling, and I don't see some at all because Trustee Vogel's on the phone and Trustee Mercer or Trustee McDonald's not on the screen. But I think that's a good use of our time for tonight, so that we'll just, if it's okay, we'll end the work session now. And I just want to thank Deb for all the help you've been providing in keeping us focused. But I appreciate the trustees in particular for taking the time to own this in terms of what we really want MCPS to stand for the future. So thank you for your thoughtfulness during this work session and all your considerations. Everyone brought up really good points. So if it's okay with everyone, we're done. And we can wave to Trustee Sturgis, Trustee McDonald, Trustee Wake, and Trustee Vogel. So, bye.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate your time and I appreciate your input.
Okay, thanks, Deb.